welcome to the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship here in Durham, North Carolina, on the ancestral lands of the Eno, Saponi, Shakori, Sissipaha, and Lumbee people whose people live here, descendants live here in this area today. I'm Reverend Jacqueline Brett, and whomever you are, wherever you come from, whatever your race, your gender, whomever you love, you are welcome here in this beloved community. And if you are visiting with us today, I invite you to place your name in the chat box right now so that we might give you a wonderful, warm ERUUF welcome on this chilly winter morning. And we also invite you, if you are visiting with us, to join us on future Sunday mornings for our Inquirers classes for visitors and newcomers. That class takes place at 9:30 a.m. and right now it is taking place online on Zoom. And you can find out information about it on our website, on the events section. We also have a wide variety of classes for children that take place on Sunday mornings as well. And information about those can also be found on our website, or you may contact our Director of Religious Education, Julia Tyler. And, you know, as you may have seen in the initial slides, we have a number of classes and events taking place. Everything is either online or in person outside right now due to Omicron. And so we invite you to participate, but you can take a look in the Friday e-news or online to find out more information about those classes. This morning, our worship service is in celebration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We were supposed to have a very special guest speaker, District Attorney Satana DeBerry. Unfortunately, DA DeBerry informed us that she has COVID and is unable to be with us on this morning. She is doing all right, but certainly is not able to participate in today's service. And so we do, as we've always been doing over the last several years now, we pivot and we punt. I say that for football season. We pivot and we punt, and in doing that, Reverend Deborah Cayer will be our preacher this morning. And so with all of that in mind, let us all together center ourselves into this time, into the place that you're in, with just a recognition that we may be separated in distance, but we are together in our hearts. And let us take a deep breath in together and let it out. And we will continue now with our prelude.
Tech team, could you start my video, please? Thanks, guys. So there's Omicron and there's Snowmicron. And thanks to Snowmicron, we are working remotely this morning with all of the vagaries that go with it and all of the joys. It is a joy to be with you this morning. Our opening words this morning are the timeless words and wisdom of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. These are some things he said at various times over the years. Hear these words. There is a great day ahead. The future is on our side. It's going now through the wilderness, but the promised land is ahead.
In the inevitable moments when all seems hopeless, men know that without hope, they cannot really live. And in agonizing desperation, they cry for the bread of hope.
If we are wrong, justice is a lie. Love has no meaning.
We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed.
If you succumb to the temptation of using violence in your struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness.
I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality.
The nation that doesn't have the sense enough to share the wealth and the power with the very people who made it so. Oh, this nation doesn't have the sense to share wealth and power with the very people who made it so.
Too many people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Oh, only light can do, oh gosh, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
The question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremist will we be? Will we be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love?
We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late.
We light our chalice this morning and dedicate ourselves once again to the bright daybreak of peace, belonging, and true beloved community. Our first hymn this morning is Now Let Us Sing. The words will be on your screen. Join in.
Sing to the power of the faith, lift up your voice, let us pray, let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Lift up your voice, let us pray, let us sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us
Our story this morning is Martin's Big Words by Doreen Rappaport, illustrated by Brian Cayer. Everywhere in Martin's hometown, he saw the sign, white only. His mother said these signs were in all the cities and towns all over the southern part of the United States. Every time Martin read the words, he felt bad, until he remembered what his mother told him. You are as good as anyone. In church, Martin sang hymns and read from the Bible. He listened to his father preach, and these words made him feel good. When I grow up, I'm going to get big words too, he thought to himself. Martin did grow up, and he did become a minister like his father, and he used the big words he had heard as a child from his parents and from the Bible. Everyone can be great, he said, because everyone can serve. He studied the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. He learned how the Indian nation won freedom without ever firing a gun. Martin said love when others said hate. He said hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Martin said together when others said separate. He said peace when others said war. Sooner or later, he said, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together. In 1955, on a cold December day in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks was coming home from work. A white man told her to get up from her seat on the bus so he could sit. She had planned for this for a long time, and she said no, and she was arrested. Montgomery's black citizens learned of her arrest. It made them angry, and they decided not to ride the buses until they could sit anywhere they wanted. For 381 days, they walked to work and school and church. They walked in rain and snow and cold and blistering heat. Martin walked with them and talked with them and sang and prayed with them until white city leaders had to agree that they could sit anywhere they wanted. He said, when the history books are written, someone will say there lived black people who had the courage to stand up for their rights. For the next 10 years, Black Americans all over the South protested for equal rights. Martin walked and talked with them and sang and prayed with them. White ministers told them to stop. Mayors and governors and police chiefs and judges ordered them to stop, but they kept on marching. He said, wait. For years I have heard the word wait. We have waited more than 340 years for our rights. The people were jailed and beaten and murdered, but they kept on marching. Some Black Americans wanted to fight back with their fists. Martin convinced them not to by reminding them of the power of love. He said, love is the key to the problems of the world. Many white Southerners hated and feared Martin's words. A few threatened to kill him and his family. His house was bombed. His brother's house was bombed. But he refused to stop. He said, remember, if I am stopped, this movement will not be stopped because God is with this movement. The marches continued. More and more Americans listened to Martin's words. He shared his dreams and filled them with hope. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. After 10 years of protests, the lawmakers in Washington voted to end segregation. The white-only signs in the South came down. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. cared about all Americans. He cared about people all over the world, and people all over the world admired him. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He won it because he taught others to fight with words, not with fists. Martin went wherever people needed help. In 1968, in April, he went to Memphis, Tennessee. He went to help garbage workers who were on strike. He walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them. On his second day there, he was shot and he died. But his big words are alive for us still today. Freedom, peace, together, love, justice. These were Martin's big words. So something to think about this day and every day. What are your big words? What are the big words that you live your life by, that you are prepared to work for? Something to think about this day, every day.
Hi, I'm Sarah Terry, and I'm with ERUUF's Board of Trustees. I grew up in the United Methodist Church. Every few years, our church would be assigned a new pastor by the powers that be in the Kansas Conference office in Topeka. Sometimes this was a good fit for our congregation, and sometimes not so much. Even when there was someone who was a good fit, that person never stayed for more than 3 or 5 years. And I saw a similar approach in many of the faith communities I experienced over the years. A mysterious hierarchy shuffles the deck and a congregation draws a card. So it was a bit of a revelation to me arriving at ERUUF and learning that UU congregations decide for themselves who will be their lead minister. As I grew in my understanding of Unitarian Universalism, I learned that, in fact, practicing democracy within our congregations is one of our core principles. Our fifth, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The use of the democratic process within our congregations. There is no more important decision that we make together than calling a lead minister. It's not as easy as drawing a card. It can be complicated and carries its own risks and rewards. And it is a decision that should be made by all of us together. Decision by every member of ERUUF, not just a quorum. Calling a minister is a collective responsibility, and we owe it to ourselves to all show up and give this decision meaning. I take this obligation very seriously, and I hope each of you do as well. Please set aside the time on January 30th at 12:30 to show up, make your voice heard, and help build beloved community. A tremendous amount of work has already been done to support this call. The search committee spent countless hours gathering information from all of you to discern our needs and wants as a community and to create the congregational record. The Board of Trustees also considered the search committee recommendation and took steps to discuss and concur. Representatives from both the board and search committee formed a negotiating team that is working out the specifics of the employment contract. And certainly Reverend Brett has done her own discernment, preparation, and decision-making. If you have not yet explored her website, I encourage each of you to do that. You can find a link to it at eruuf.org and also plan to participate in the various activities planned for Candidating Week. Information about all of this is available online, including some helpful frequently asked questions, including questions about what to expect at the meeting, timing, and what happens next. These are all designed to give you the information you need to vote with confidence at the congregational meeting. ERUUF needs each member to register in advance, mark your calendar for Sunday, January 30th, and prepare to vote. This is an exciting moment in the history of our fellowship. I hope you will be a part of it.
This morning's reading is from a speech given at Riverside Church by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in New York City on April 4th, 1967. And I just want to say that the language that he uses is in the language of his day and time. And we sincerely believe that were he speaking today, he might have chosen more inclusive pronouns. But I present these words as he spoke them, knowing that we, alive and speaking today, would make different choices. And he said, "We can no longer afford to worship the God of hate or bow before the altar of retaliation. The oceans of history are made turbulent by the ever-rising tides of hate. History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursued this self-defeating path of hate. But as Arnold Toynbee says, love is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil. Therefore, the first hope in our inventory must be the hope that love is going to have the last word. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. Life often leaves us standing bare, naked, and dejected with a lost opportunity. The tide in the affairs of men does not remain at the flood, it ebbs. We may cry out desperately for time to pause in her passage, but time is deaf to every plea and rushes on. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residue of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, "Too late." There is an invisible book of life that faithfully records our vigilance or our neglect. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. We still have a choice today: nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We must move past indecision to action. We must find new ways to speak for peace in Vietnam and justice throughout the developing world, a world that borders on our doors. If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter, but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the sons of God, and our brothers wait eagerly for our response. Shall we say the odds are too great? Shall we tell them the struggle is too hard? Will our message be that the forces of American life militate against their arrival as full men and we send our deepest regret? Or will there be another message of longing, of hope, of solidarity with their yearnings, of commitment to their cause, whatever the cost? The choice is ours. And though we might prefer it otherwise, we must choose in this crucial moment of human history.
I invite you to join me now in the spirit of meditation and spoken prayer. Let us praise the spirit of winter, the cold and ice that make us slow down, whether we wish to or not, that help us remember that we are part of something large and gracious, part of the great source of love and energy that sets small children running for joy as the white flakes fall from the sky. We remember that we are part of a great source of justice that seizes us, shakes us, turns our hearts inside out when we suddenly see the world in new ways. We remember the power that flows into us from a great source that fills us with strength to reach out and join with others, to work for the greater good. Spirit of love and justice, we give thanks for all the beauty and goodness that sustains us. We give thanks for the chance to be more together than we could ever be alone. This morning, with tenderness, we hold in our hearts all who suffer in body and mind and spirit. This morning, we hold Kim Swain, whose mother, Elaine Young, died on January 10th. Trish Barron, as she works hard to recover from a stroke. And Diane Blount, as she recovers from surgery. This morning, too, we rejoice with all who celebrate life's blessings. Kim McKinney, Darren Barry, and their son Galen, who recently brought their 17-month-old daughter and sister, Kei, home from Korea, where she was born. We send our love and our energy this morning to everyone, everywhere who works for peace and human rights. May we never lose our vision and our hope for justice for all. May we have the steely determination and courage to work to preserve our democracy and equal opportunity for all, and voting rights for all. Let's pause here for a few moments of silence to consider what's most important in our heart this morning. We give thanks this day for all that supports us and sustains us. May we ever use our gifts in service of the greater good. Amen.
Hello, UU family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up, yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, hold me close, yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close, yes, hold me close, oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please, hold me close. Oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me.
Oh, I love that music. I love where it takes me. I hope it took you someplace good. So we were thrilled when Durham's District Attorney Setuna DeBerry accepted our invitation to be our guest preacher this morning. And unfortunately, it's turned out that she can't be with us. And she said it's okay to share with you that it's because after 2 years of avoiding it in her public-facing position, she finally did catch up with COVID, or it caught up with her, Omicron. So we wish her the best. We wish her, we send her healing energy and our best wishes, along with everybody else who's struggling with Omicron or anything else in the world this morning. So I was actually pleased because as I had done some reading in preparation for this service, I realized there were things that I wanted to say. This is my last Martin Luther King Day service with you. And so I'm sorry that the district attorney can't be here, but I'm actually glad that I have this chance to share a few thoughts with you about about just about some things. So here we go. We remember Dr. King's courageous political positions and all of his stirring words, which were inspired by his strong connections with both his spiritual and his physical ancestors. And this year, the words of his that keep echoing for me are the fierce urgency of now. We are living in a time when we are faced with choices that have ultimate consequences, and it is urgent that we act now on so many fronts. Dr. King first used this phrase in 1963 at the March on Washington. Before he told us about his dream for his children that day, he told us that the time to act is now. He said, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous, positive action. The fierce urgency of now. This is truth-telling in the tradition of the ancient Hebrew prophets. The ancient prophet would go to the wilderness to seek communion and guidance from God about how the people could best get through trouble they were facing. And when the prophet had received guidance, they'd go back to the city to tell the people something urgently real and true in a language that was intended to shock them out of complacency into new behavior. It often, actually, sadly, didn't work in the short run. The people didn't listen. But the stories were recorded, and they've been handed down to us as wisdom stories, as cautionary tales, and we would be wise to pay attention. So Dr. King drew on the power of the prophetic Hebrew tradition in all of his work and in all of his public speaking. His words affect us deeply because they come from a place so close to the bone, so close to the soul. They come out of what is most urgently real and true. And when we listen, really listen, his words have the power to arrest our attention and turn us in a new direction. The fierce urgency of now. What is so urgent now in this day and time? Racial justice, for sure. In the past few years, more people have started to understand how racism is tightly designed to ensure oppression. More of us have started to look behind politely, politically drawn curtains to see and understand the false story that white skin is better than darker skin. And we've begun to dismantle the ways this lie is embedded within our laws and our institutions to ensure unequal distribution of benefits and wealth. Racism is a false story. It's a lie, but it is twisted logic that is continually urged on us whenever powerful forces urge us to pull down the shades and go back to business as usual. Racism urges us constantly to move along. There's nothing to see here, people. But when we do that, it benefits white people at the expense of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, just as it's designed to. And we, all of us, are learning to say no to this more consistently. Another crisis of our time, of course, is the peril that the earth is in. We are living amid natural forces that have been set swinging into wild imbalance. As temperatures rise, glaciers melt and ocean levels rise. Oceans also capture heat, and that impacts and changes the great air currents of the jet stream. It's now to the point that conditions in many places are rapidly becoming unlivable. Places like Australia and California now catch fire and burn until there's nothing left to burn. And other low-lying areas flood, even if those places are currently home to 1 billion people, as is the case in one area of Southeastern Asia, which means that we are poised to see global migration and refugees as never before. We could do many things to slow this process and reverse it, but again, powerful interests intervene and seek to buy solutions only for themselves. To do this, they've created massive disinformation based in outright lies, and they're using this to engineer a massive transfer of global wealth so they can buy the high ground literally for themselves. There is all kind of trouble for other people in this logic. But what the powerful don't understand is that there's also trouble in it for themselves, because there is no such thing as isolated safety. For one thing, they fail to take into account that the relative high ground in places like Florida is over faulty limestone that collapses regularly. Or in places like California, the high ground is literally over fault lines in the Earth's tectonic plates. And in the northern parts of the globe, groundwater is moving in ways that undermine the foundations of entire cities. These people don't want to acknowledge that everything in the universe is interconnected, and there is no such thing as isolated safety. Friends, we are all in this together. They just don't want to know. So much of this is based in a crisis that comes out of individual selfishness. Selfishness causes politicians to tell massive lies about elections in order to gain power for the sole purpose of fleecing wealth from the rest of us. We can see something similar when sports figures who don't want to comply with league rules around vaccination lie about their status and then throw massive public tantrums when officials hold them accountable. We see this in protests where parents threaten teachers and school boards because they don't want anyone making public safety rules that require them or their children to wear a mask. We see this in angry airline passengers cussing out and even throwing punches at airline flight attendants who enforce safety rules. What all of these angry people try to ignore is the reality that the truth of science, economics, politics, and just reality in general matters. Reality matters. What a concept. And the truth is always going to prevail over their small personal interests. But they seem unaware, or they just don't have the moral courage to acknowledge that when they lie, they help create conditions that are not good for themselves along with everyone else. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there. All of this stress and trouble leaves people emotionally angry and highly reactive. And so cars become weapons, and people with guns use them to shoot others when they've been provoked just a little. Even words become weaponized on talk TV and social media. All of this becomes a form of violence. And as Isaac Asimov once observed, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. It takes real effort to find peaceful, mutually agreeable solutions. Taking the route of violence is a faulty shortcut to peace, to getting peace and security for just yourself alone. It's faulty. It doesn't work in the long run. Dr. King, of course, constantly grappled with the reality of violence. And what he concluded is that ultimately, though it could have quite dire consequences for himself and for others, violence is ultimately a self-defeating system because there's a weakness and a flaw built into violence. He said, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie nor establish the truth. Through violence, you murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Dr. King. And by love, he didn't mean the feeling. He had long distinguished between eros, which is romantic love, and philia, which is brotherly love for the people in your family or group or tribe, and agape, which is selfless love that comes from a greater source beyond your self-interests. Agape comes from a greater good. As the writer of the Gospel of John put it, love comes from God, for God is love. When Dr. King spoke of love, he meant that agape, this highest form of love, can inspire action that is grounded first in love of others and love of the earth. And that this creates the stability of shared interests and strong relationships, and that this in turn helps create the lasting greater good that inspired it. Love is the only thing that can create those conditions. In addition to his respect for the power of the Hebrew prophets, Dr. King also relied equally on the principles of liberal religion. Liberal theology proposes that God is not all-powerful, that in fact, God has put limits on God's self so that conscious beings can make choices and have the opportunity to exercise their agency. Furthermore, you can, and in fact, many liberal theologians do, work out this logic without a personal God. In this way of understanding, God is a shorthand way of talking about the real but impersonal power that flows through life. That power has an intention for goodness, and it intends for life to thrive. What people who've studied this have noticed is that no matter how long it takes, that power of goodness ultimately is stronger than anything that opposes it. In the long run, good triumphs. This is why in 1965, at the end of the March for Voting Rights in Selma, from Selma to Montgomery, Dr. King spoke about the long struggle of rights for Black people in this nation. And with absolute confidence, he assured people that day that their rights were coming. He said, "How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you shall reap what you sow. How long? Not long. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." Whatever you believe about the nature of ultimate reality, both the secular and the sacred, you always have a choice. At the heart of life, there's a question: will we choose to act for our own small, limited self-interests? Or will we choose to act for the larger, greater good? Will we choose the shortcut of violence that leads to negativity, selfishness, imbalance, and instability? Or will we choose to act for the common good? There are very few absolute rights or wrongs. Human beings are entirely capable of messing up anything that's good. And yet, still, this question matters. Are you going to act in the ways of selfishness which lead to hate and violence? Or will you act in the ways of love that lead to shared interest in the common good? It might take a while, but that interest for the common good will prevail over time if we lean in on that work. Fear is what sets our self-interest in motion, and if we use self-interest to measure, there's little immediate evidence that love offers its own rewards. The rewards are there, but they're at a higher order of magnitude than we might first ever notice or even ever experience. Because so often the reward comes later. For instance, after we've limited our greed, our consumption, and our production of waste and carbon, our children and their children will have a more livable future. And if we don't, we leave our children and theirs a horrific legacy. On February 6, 1968, Dr. King gave a speech called A Proper Sense of Priorities, and he concluded with these thoughts. On some positions, cowardice asks, is it safe? Expediency asks, is it politic? Vanity asks, is it popular? But conscience asks, is it right? And there comes a time when we must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Unquote. The fiercely pressing issues of our time make it urgent that we choose not what is safe or popular or politic. The fierce urgency of our time asks us, begs us to make choices that are right because they are choices that add to and sustain the common good. At this time of year, many people choose a word or a phrase to guide them in the coming year. This year, in addition to our personal words, all of us might also choose the phrase, the common good, or the greater good, and add it to our personal mantras. Because what life fiercely, urgently needs now is for each of us to put aside our small interests and choose to act instead for the greater common good. May it ever be so. Amen. Ashe. Blessed be. Friends, we come every week to this place seeking ways to put our love and our gifts into action, to give from our hearts in these ways that I've just spoken of, that Dr. King encouraged us in. And so as we listen to the offertory this afternoon, our beloved community chorus is going to sing. As we listen to this, you can contemplate all of the things that are calling you, the ways that you would like to be involved. Also at this time, if you choose, if you don't already make a contribution regularly, you might want to go to our website and make an online contribution. We can consider all these things while we listen to the offertory.
There is power when we call on justice. There is power when we call on justice. There is power when we call on justice. To break every chain, break every chain. Break every chain. When we call on justice, there is power. When we call on justice, there is power. When we call on justice. To break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There's a body rising up. There's a body rising up. There's a body rising up. To break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There's a body rising up. to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain, to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. I hear the chains falling. 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 There's a fire. I hear the chains falling. There's a fire. I hear the chains falling. There's a fire. I hear the chains falling. To break every chain. I hear the chains falling. I hear the chains falling.
Beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. How good to see those beloved faces. We give thanks for all the gifts so generously given that help to weave the fabric of this community and that weave us into the fabric of the larger world as well. Our final hymn this morning is Lift Every Voice and Sing, and this is what Isha Asano says about this final hymn. She says, "This song deserves to be sung with attention. It's a song that starkly names the horrors and violence of racism in this country, and it's a song that should make us uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the history that it calls upon, uncomfortable with the fact that the struggle for racial justice continues and has not come as far as it should have come by now. How can anyone sing the words, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, without deep discomfort?" And she continues, "So when we sing this song, will you join me in singing with intentionality? Will you join me in singing with deep discomfort? With the pain and horror that these words refer back to, and the discomfort with the fact that these words do not only refer to a distant history, but to also to what is happening in our day, our time, right now. Will you commit to sitting with your own discomfort? And then will you tap into that discomfort and do something? Will you lift your voice and sing until earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty?" Let's sing together now.
Others die. We have come over a path which with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of our gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the bright gleam bright star is kind. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in thy path, we pray. Oh, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Settled beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our name, our nature.
Ashe. Our closing words are from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's speech at Riverside Church on April 4th. And he said, "Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter, but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the sons of God, and our brothers wait eagerly for our response. Shall we say the odds are too great? Shall we tell them the struggle is too hard? Will our message be that the forces of American life militate against their arrival as full men, and we send our deepest apologies? Or will there be another message of longing, of hope, of solidarity with their yearnings, of commitment to their cause, whatever the cost? The choice is ours. And though we might prefer it otherwise, we must choose in this crucial moment of human history. Go in peace, my friends. Go in love. And may you be warm, safe, and dry on this winter morning. Amen and Ashe.